I'm just going to dive right in. I think, you know, the more like research and the more things I've read, your TED Talks, I think you're quite an educated person, but you also seem like a very interested person. Do you want to give me some insight on your personal connection to cannabis?
Of course, and it's been definitely an interesting connection because until about 4 or 5 years ago, I actually knew hardly anything about cannabis or CBD. My background is in tech. I was a tech executive focused on big data and analytics, which actually becomes relevant as I go through my cannabis journey. And my husband almost died from an aortal dissection right before my
Wow.
eyes. We had to airlift him for life-saving surgery, 3 open-heart surgeries actually back to back. And that was incredible. I mean, literally saved his life. The pain medication after the open-heart surgeries were not so good. And as we were battling with a slew of various opioids that were being given to him through the doctors and all the side effects of them, I was just looking for something else that we might be able to use, given it was clearly affecting his mental state in so many negative ways. And we have 2 kids. So that's when our good friend Andy Nordam came to visit to see how my husband was, started talking about how CBD specifically had made such an incredibly positive effect for his son, Max, who was born with cerebral palsy. And over the course of the past few months at that point, and we're talking 4.5 years ago or so, Max had improved significantly. You know, really his spasticity had improved so much, his movement had improved so much. And, you know, Andy said, let's try CBD on Scott, my husband. And it was literally an incredible 24-hour difference where his pain was reduced without any of the side effects. And I'm a scientist and an engineer. To me, it was like, this is amazing, but I need to know more because it's, you know, while magic is amazing, I also want to kind of go to the, you know, background and understand how things work. So long story short, Andy and I decided to create a nonprofit focused on understanding not just if CBD and cannabis work for these many, you know, potential conditions, but how they work, why they work, really understanding the mechanisms of action. So that's how our foundation, Holistic Research and Education Foundation, was formed, because what we realized was there was a lot of curiosity about CBD and cannabis and its potential magic, and very little research that was done on its benefits. Most of the research that was funded by the government was all about its potential harm, not about its benefits.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, I mean, cannabinoid, or, you know, cannabinoid as well as cannabis research is kind of a relatively new thing, right? Like it's basically what, 70s or 80s when this really came to the forefront of like, let's study this for not just harmful effects. Is that correct?
That's right. We didn't even know. I mean, obviously, cannabis has been used for thousands of years, literally. But and you know, we knew it had calming effects, and I think you know, a lot of, you know, probably a lot of shamanistic religions and a lot of other, Eastern cultures have used it for many medicinal purposes as well. But I think in our Western culture, we had dismissed for some reason its benefits, and we're looking at it as more of a, you know, maybe, you know, reduces pain and hence is used great, you know, for maybe end of life situations, but not necessarily for treating many ailments. And you know, as a person who was just living in my day-to-day crazy tech life, it was not something I'd really paid any attention to. What I found out is we didn't even know the mechanism of the endocannabinoid system until the 1980s. So it is such a recent discovery that we have this massive system in our body that really connects with every cell, every muscle, every organ system. And we didn't even know about it until the 1980s.
And so on the endocannabinoid system, that's basically the system that we have. It's like an electrical, neurological system, right? That deals with pain,
it's a
inflammation
system. Yeah, it's a receptor system that we have many receptor systems in our bodies. Obviously, that's how so many compounds actually connect and affect our body. And then the cannabinoid system is is actually the largest system from my understanding, and it connects literally with every organ, cell, whether it's the endocrine system, the obviously our entire nervous system, our digestive system. We have receptors throughout our entire body, from our brain and our central nervous system to our to our skin, and basically everywhere in our gut. So we have receptors throughout our body that are able to actually connect with cannabinoids that come from cannabis or hemp, and this is a relatively recent discovery.
Yeah, and so the cannabinoids the plant of cannabis actually they're phytocannabinoids, right? And then they mimic exactly what our body is doing, and that's how they're relating.
That's exactly right. So phyto, of course, meaning plant, cannabis and hemp provide, well over 100 known phytocannabinoids. And we have endocannabinoids that our body produces based on, whatever stress or pain response that we might be having. And so these receptors were obviously designed for what our body produced. But as with many things, sometimes whether it's stress or disease conditions, changes how our body responds, and maybe our body gets out of balance. So what's amazing about the endocannabinoid system is it actually promotes homeostasis or balance in the body. And if we're unable to produce it ourselves, it's something we can take. Just like when you're vitamin D deficient, you take extra vitamin D, right? I think a lot of us are doing that these days. This is the same thing, is to be able to create that balance.
And I love the way you talk about balance in our bodies as homeostasis. You're actually the third person and doctor that we've had, third person that speaks about that. And it's a great way to bring everything together, and that we need all these moving parts to work together and to be balanced. So that being said, you mentioned a bunch of receptors in our body: digestion, the nervous system. I know that there's a lot of studies coming out that have to do with anxiety, depression, and cannabinoids. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Of course. But first, let me tell you, since you did say about the balance on the whole body, that's actually why we're called Holistic Research and Education Foundation with a W, because we're looking at the whole body, which is so important versus being just a specialist. And second, we're looking at the whole plant. And we want to make sure that we're not just isolating specific cannabinoids. We believe that nature works in concert with everything that comes together. So
love it.
That's very important.
Yeah, I love it.
But in terms of your question, actually, it's so timely. We, of course, have been, our foundation focused on funding CBD and cannabis research across many U.S. institutes. And we have some amazing research that's been ongoing for the last several years. Just last week, we launched a brand new study with UC Irvine and the UC Institute of Predictive Technology, actually a first of its kind, largest ever study, where we are collecting what the FDA calls real world data from, we have a reach of 2.5 million Americans who are taking CBD or cannabis, thanks to our massive partners. I mean, we have so many amazing partners who are leveraging their distribution lists and things like that. We have a massive reach, and we're collecting data through a survey that has been designed and approved by UC Irvine. So it's an amazingly rigorous scientific study to understand what is the baseline anxiety and insomnia levels of the people taking this, so that we can actually gauge their responses based on their state of mind, which is really important, because where you start from is going to depend, is going to actually
your choices
and exactly. And then we ask questions on what they're taking, how much they're taking, what frequency they're taking, the modality they're taking. Is it an edible? Is it a tincture? Is it a topical? Are they having CBD or cannabis drinks? And what effects they're having, what benefits they're having, as well as potentially what harms they're having. We got to collect all the data. We also ask what additional things they may be taking. Are they also taking melatonin? Are they taking Xanax? I mean, so that we have a complete picture of the state of mind, anxiety, and insomnia, especially during these crazy days of the pandemic, when clearly anxiety levels are through the roof. So we should be able to not just collect this data, which is going to be a massive scale, but back to my big data and analytics days from tech, we should be able to segment the data so that we can tell, hopefully, based on the information. Apparently, women over a certain age or men between these ages, perhaps with these pre-existing conditions, are reacting this way or that way. So we can have very interesting precision medicine oriented findings out of
Yeah.
this very, very large study. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited.
I can tell you're so cute, Kayleen, how you're like, yay, we got the biggest study. That's amazing. And that's just such important work. And like you said, right now, it couldn't be more timely. I've heard too many stories of the state of human existence right now in towns and cities all over the place. So it's a really good time for that for study to come out. So on that note, how can someone be sure that they're getting a quality product? And how can that play into the ultimate best healing for them? How can they be sure? Where is it that they're going to go? Somebody right now, let's say that I need sleep. I'm dealing with anxiety. I heard CBD helps. How can they be sure that they're getting something that isn't full of pesticides or, besides organic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is not a very clear-cut answer yet, and that is a problem. So we clearly have a problem in quality control in this unregulated market. And that's just what we have. We have an unregulated market, especially with CBD. I'd say cannabis is far better regulated within the states that it's legal. And of course, you cannot cross state lines, and there's all this other hoopla, but at least it's regulated within the states. CBD is not regulated, even though it has such amazing potential. You don't know if you're taking CBD. So, my kids who are under 18 can go and buy milk and CBD from the grocery store, yet we don't know what's in them. So the entire premise is, there's a missing piece there. It's wrong, especially given many studies, whether it's JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, or last summer's Clean Label Project study, or this summer's FDA study on hundreds of CBD products that they tested, all found, in all cases, the numbers may vary slightly, but well over 50% of them are not what they say they are. They may have more CBD, less CBD, more THC than, legal for hemp, which means, your child may get high without you intending it, and a lot of pesticides and or heavy metals. So the point is, unfortunately, all evidence from the FDA to Clean Label Project to JAMA indicates that there are many not so clean products out there, which to me is both a huge public safety issue for all of us, but also affects the industry. Because if you cannot trust the players, then even though you believe CBD or hemp can be very beneficial, it's very hard to decide which one to take. So we're in an interesting conundrum where there are definitely some good players, and there are also, I'm sure, many others that are good. We just don't know how to pick them, because the certificate of analysis with COA, which is a huge important piece, even those are not kept up to speed, because you want to be able to do batch testing, not like do it once and then see what happens.
Yeah, because you're constantly growing, right? So there's always going to be the need to be like, what's in this? How's it testing? And then the need for CBD product is so huge, right? So then there's these massive crops where it used to be just small farms. I'm assuming that really good product is going to be a small farm where they're able to keep up with that kind of batch testing, right?
Well, one would hope that, I think small farms certainly have a higher chance of doing quality control, but I would hope that if we have the right regulations and there are larger farms who still want to play by the good rules and produce good products, size should not matter as long as you're doing the right thing, except the right thing has not been defined or enforced. So we have more of both a definition and enforcement issue, and therefore a quality control issue across the board. So I find that very troubling.
Yeah, that is concerning. And then, it's great to hear you're kind of on that forefront of making it aware, right? So then is it the FDA that's going to be making these choices to help people get the right product? Or, is it people going and checking the COAs of a company to make sure that they're getting a good product?
Well, I think there are certainly numerous both nonprofits as well as hopefully labs and others that who are going to jump in to create some level of like a good housekeeping seal of approval of sorts, right? Just like what USDA organic means something, and we know that we know how it's grown, how it's processed. I think we need something similar for CBD and hemp. And I know the Hemp Authority and Hemp Roundtable are working on those, creating those models, and hopefully having more and more people buy into them. But it's both creating the standard, enforcing the standard, and having people buy into it, because the standard means something. That means the standard is attracting more consumers, because if there's demand for that standard, the seal of approval, I think more suppliers will actually want to play with those same rules. So it's your typical, economic cycle of supply and demand. And I think consumers realize what this means. Hopefully they'll demand higher quality products, which will pull more suppliers into that same, above, just on the right side of the line type of processing.
And because this is so widely available, it isn't just about educating the doctors on this, right? And there are doctors out there that actually can help somebody kind of find their way and prescribe, correct? Like there are specific, cannabis doctors, or?
There are, even though that education is also sorely needed. I know, even, here in California, UCSC, UCLA, some of the universities that are so at the cutting edge of some of this research. UCSD have had a cannabis research center since year 2000. It's the very first one in the US. Even at, places like this, we only have a few people who are that knowledgeable. Most doctors will say, well, I think it's good, but let's just take it to something I can prescribe from a pharma perspective. So clearly we need physician education, but that's going to come from evidence-based, rigorous clinical trials, because physicians are not going to just look at, I heard it's good, let me prescribe it. Not the model, obviously, right?
Yeah. So you're basically, your foundation is creating that. You are kind of the base. Is there anybody else like the Holistic Research Foundation, or are you guys kind of at that forefront?
Quite this big. I know, clearly we're not the only ones who care about this. There's so many like-minded, like-spirited people. I know a lot of people are putting a lot of effort into it. What we're trying to do is not just put effort into it, but realizing that the demand is for certain amount of scientific rigor. We want to make sure that if we provide that, even if it's more expensive and more time consuming, which unfortunately it is, at least it's going to be more broadly accepted. And that should hopefully make it more of a groundswell and make a bigger shift versus these smaller elements where, yes, there's great data, but not enough people pay attention to it. So you haven't really made the change that you desire to make.
Yeah, it takes a while. And it takes a lot of interest and it's good to know you have got a lot of good partners. So on the note of what's working, is there any data that's being collected or happening on COVID? I've heard recent reports of it came out of Canada, CBD helps COVID. And then, is there any research that you're doing based around COVID?
Around COVID, in terms of getting better from COVID, from the actual disease, we're not personally doing any, but I've talked to several doctors who are doing some experimental work in places like Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I saw some great places. And what I understand is that because of its anti-inflammatory effects, that it really can make a massive difference in that, as COVID has this crazy inflammation, and then our body's reaction is almost like the disease makes our body react in a certain way. And it's our reaction is that what take people down the slippery slope and, eventually kill people. So it can really help with the inflammatory response. So to me, that's amazing. That goes back to the whole mechanism of action, because CBD and cannabis appear to have anti-inflammatory effects. So whether it's helping you with your ache or pain from your shoulder or an inflammatory effect in your lungs, it's a very similar, if you think about it, effect. Is just helping different things. Whether it's a torn muscle, that's inflammation, or your lungs, it's helping with anti-inflammation. Its other big effect is anti-anxiety and an overall calming of the central nervous system. And that mechanism is believed to be, and we are actually doing a lot of work on this, is through modulating both the serotonin receptors as well as the GABA receptors, so that we are actually trying to really nail this down. There's some early research that points to it, and we're trying to really showcase that is the case, so that we know that whether it's an autistic kid who is acting up, or if somebody is really hyper anxiety or depression because of COVID, you can actually bring them down to a better level, and their overall interaction with the world around them will be better, as well as obviously their immune response will be better, since stress and anxiety are some of the worst things we can do to our body.
the triggers for the immune. And so this is all back to the homeostasis. It's like, if you can get your nervous system nice and calm, you know, that helps with your immune response, etc.
Right. So, for instance, like if the GABA receptors, which are the inhibitory receptors, are not working as hard as they should for whatever reason, you know, again, it might be external factors, internal factors. If you're able to actually, you know, move them up, and they can actually move, they can be more active. You can actually create that calming effect versus something that's going to actually get your excitatory, you know, transmitters going. So it's almost like understanding how your body works and realizing that it is not just looking and trying to move one part, but looking at it holistically and realizing this is out of whack, and maybe we can do this, and just kind of bring things back to a balance. And sometimes I think that holistic approach in this case works better, because you're not just pinpointing and fixing one thing, but looking at the entire system.
And so this is basically, you know, part of that is getting to know yourself really well. Yes, seeking out a team of doctors if need be, who can assist you in making the right choices around cannabis, but also what works for me. Why am I not sleeping? And if you can't figure it out, the doctor can help you. But that's part of the homeostasis as well, is really looking within, because we all are snowflakes. It's really hard with all of the products out there to be like, I'm just not sleeping. What should I take? Tinctures or gummies? Isolate or broad spectrum? You know, it's just about educating yourself. And the better we know ourselves, the better we are to meet this product, whatever it is for us, halfway. Right?
It is overwhelming at the amount of information, especially when we generalize that information, because you're so right that we're all snowflakes. That's why I think personalized medicine or precision medicine, at least the direction to that is so important, because you know, you have these averages, except, you know, nobody has a family of 1.8 with 2.5 dogs and half a cat. Like, that does not exist. So therefore, we have to make sure the average, we don't live by averages. We have to look at our specific situation, our both the demographic info, as well as, since we have lived dynamic lives. I mean, everything from pre-existing conditions to current state of anxiety and depression and whatever may be happening internally in your family or externally in the world. And all of that will affect what may work for you right here, right now. Yeah. And we don't treat disease that way, which is why it becomes disease, because we have lack of ease instead of focusing on wellness and what you may need right now. You don't have the same breakfast every day. That's not what your body needs. So it's the same thing. It's just realizing what you need and hopefully being more in tune, expressing that to your physicians, who are very knowledgeable people, but so that they also realize that you are seeking for something more personalized given your current situation.
Yeah, and I really feel like something like that disease really fast tracks people to like, oh my God, what is it that I need? You know, I need to figure this out. I've talked to lots of young women who have gone through breast cancer at a young age. And I mean, they have to subscribe to Cancer University, and they have to figure out all those moving parts that's getting them to where they're at today and helping them get through their day. And I know a lot of women who are actually taking cannabis for anxieties, for troubles, if you will, like just dealing with the emotional side of cancer and whatnot. But it's them who, it's not just given to them. They're often a big player in what's going to be best for them. And that's something what disease gives you, is hopefully that opportunity to get to know what you need for yourself. So,
and it's not one thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just one thing that's going to help you. It's a whole selection of things, right? It could be some specific pharma drug that's going to help with a situation, along with the anxiety-reducing or pain-reducing elements of cannabis, along with some meditation and walking in it, whatever it may be. It's a combination of all of these things that, in the end, give us that wellness that we need. It's not one thing.
So then, can you tell me about some studies that are happening that you're really excited about? Would that be the anxiety one earlier, the anxiety and depression, the big study that you were talking about? Is that something that you're really excited about?
I'm super excited about that one for sure, given the scope of it and the fact that we'll be able to really, given the tremendous number of people going to collect data from, that we should be able to segment and provide some precision information based on demographics and also pre-existing conditions and lifestyle. So I'm really excited about that. But I'm also super excited about a couple other studies. We are doing an incredible study here at UCSD focused on CBD efficacy for autism. But it is not just an autism study. It is a mechanistic study to understand how CBD reduces anxiety and what happens in the brain of a autistic child. So this
Wow.
is where I'm really hoping we're going to learn how GABA receptors and glutamate receptors and serotonin receptors may be changing that makes the child be far more social, have less anxiety, be able to have somebody look them in the eye and not freak out from loud noises and things like that. And that's great for obviously huge population of autistic kids and their families, but also that same mechanism is going to apply to any anxiety situation in so many ways. So the more we understand the mechanisms, the more we can use them in other diseases. So I'm super excited about that because it's a first look into what's happening in the brain and how some of these things are changing versus just doing a typical clinical only study. So this is a clinical plus study that does the clinical, but also does this mechanism study. So that's, I think, will be literally revolutionary. The other study is taking place in the University of Utah. Again, truly a first of its kind study of healthy adults because we have no baseline. So what we're doing is, that study is underway already. We are doing fMRI, a functional MRI scanning of the brain of healthy adults and giving them CBD, cannabis, whole plant, and placebo. Of course, it's double blind. Nobody knows what they're getting. And it's crossover. So everyone gets all of them. They just don't know in which order. And we look at what's happening in their brain regarding pain response, stress response, cognitive response. How are they dealing with anxiety? How are they dealing with executive function? We'll actually get to see how their brain has changes in dependency between different parts of the brain based on if it's CBD only, if it's THC only, if it's whole plant, or if it's a placebo. And that should help us as a baseline as to how these products work in our brain for the very first time. And then obviously you can apply that to any disease condition, but at least we'll know what it means for a healthy person.
Which is really interesting because I feel like it's really hard when it comes to dosages, right? Because we are so individual. It's hard to know where to start. Obviously start slow, start in small amounts.
Indeed.
But it affects everybody so differently. I know that I have friends who try this tincture and I try the same tincture and I'm sweating and my heart's beating really fast. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really stoned and freaked out right now. Right. Where they're like, whoa, we're just so relaxed over here. So I think it's really interesting that the human body actually, is very unique, correct? That's part of your...
Absolutely. So in the same study in Utah, we are also taking blood samples to see what specific biomarkers and inflammatory markers may be present so that we can see if there's a correlation between their unique body elements and how their response is. So we're looking to correlate whether you're freaking out and if there's something in your body that actually says, of the people who are acting, having more of an effect, what do they have in common? What are the people who don't appear to have any effect? What do they have in common? So we can hopefully start getting some clues, some breadcrumbs to understanding why you and I are responding completely differently. It's because we have different biomarkers, inflammatory markers in our body, and that may be one of the reasons that we're going to respond differently. And I feel like that's, again, is going to give us on our path to that precision medicine that we all need so much.
So amazing and interesting, really interesting. And like you said, the breadcrumb, because it's such a vast space, right? And there's still so much work to be done. Thank you for doing the work. I have one last question here. Do you take CBD?
I do. I take CBD every night. I've always taken it. As in last 4 years, since I didn't know it existed before. But I'd say over COVID and, whether you like it or not, I think we all have increased our anxiety levels. And I've realized I could fall asleep, but I kept on waking up in the middle of the night and thinking through things. With CBD, I'm able to both fall asleep and stay asleep. And that is, to me, like one of the best gifts I can give my body so I can, conquer the next day properly.
Yeah, sleep is definitely our best friend, especially nowadays. So all of this was so informational. Thank you so much, Paylene. We truly appreciate you being here with us, and we'll look forward to more research as it comes up. We'll definitely direct people to your research foundation. I think it's so fascinating and such important work. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you for what you do. I think creating the awareness in society is one of the most important tasks. And so these types of conferences, especially with communities who are obviously very hungry for information, it's so needed. So thank you for doing what you do. Really appreciate it. And very much look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paylene. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.